Welcome, everyone. My name is Lori Gardner. I am the president of Les Dames d'Escoffier, Washington, D.C. Regional Chapter. And in case you are not familiar with our organization, we're an international organization of women leaders in food, beverage, and hospitality. Our chapter is one of the largest. We have over 200 members, and we're a diverse group of chefs, restaurateurs, writers, nutritionists, wine and spirits specialists, food policy advocates, the list goes on and on. And what we share is a desire to give back to our food community. Our mission is to support, empower, and inspire the next generation of women leaders and to advance community based food initiatives. And we do this through our scholarships, grants, mentorship, and education programs like you are signing on tonight. So, is there something else I can help with? My watch decided to talk to me. Sorry. So we do this through education programs, as I said. Visit our website to learn more. If you're on this program, you will get added to our email list so you can hear about all of our exciting upcoming programs. This particular program is brought to you by our Global Culinary Initiative. It is one of our programs, and we have an impressive number of registrations, lots of people interested in this, and I know people are continuing to sign on. But thank you to the committee that organized this and all the panelists who you're going to hear from shortly. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan Barocas. She is co-chair of the Global Culinary Initiative along with Bonnie Benwick. Susan is a chef, a writer, and a cooking instructor, and she's going to tell you more about the committee and get our program kicked off. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you so much, Lori. Yeah, I'm Susan Barocas, and I'm delighted to see you all here tonight, and I'm delighted by the response to this program. As our name for this committee indicates, we aim to bring the diverse culinary world to DC DOMS and also to bring DC DOMS to the wider world and with programs like this. So I invite you to get a glass of wine or a cup of tea and settle in for a really wonderful discussion. You will hear more from my co-chair, Bonnie Benwick, later in the program, as she's going to be monitoring the chat. And so what we would like to do is make sure that each of you stays muted and until the program is at the end. And also to please put any questions or things you would like to hear about from our panelists into the chat, where at the end we'll have a good 15 minutes to be able to talk about your questions and anything you want to hear from the panelists about. Also, I just want to mention before we start that if you're a member of Les Dames, I would encourage you to join a committee, strongly encourage you, because being active is fun, but it's more than that. It's also excellent networking opportunities, and it gives you a voice and a role that's important in our chapter. And that's how Lauren got involved in this program, because she's on the committee. And then everything grew from there. Make sure that you're in speaker view at this point, because our Zoom mistress, Stephanie, is going to highlight our three panelists in just a moment. And tonight we are going to hear first from Micheline Mendelsohn, who is the moderator for tonight, who's a Dom also in our chapter. And she is Chief Executive Officer of the Sunnyside Restaurant Group. She also serves as Partnership Advisor for the Culinary Diplomacy Project, which we'll be hearing about. And she helps to build strategic partnerships that use food as a platform for cultural exchange. So tonight, it's all about that idea of food and culture and how we can bring the world together through it. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Micheline for what I anticipate will be a lively and enriching discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you, Susan. Well, welcome everybody. I'm so happy to see so many people joining us for this conversation. It's honestly one of my favorite topics because it centers around how food connects us across cultures and across borders. And today we're joined by two incredible voices in the space, both whom I've known for many, many years. Lauren Bernstein is the Culinary Diplomacy Project Director, her role is what she talks about is food is explored as a tool for connection, culture, and global understanding. And she is joined with Chef Art Smith, who needs no introduction, but he spent decades cooking food that's rooted in heritage, comfort, and community. And he's traveled widely, bringing people together through meals. Chef Art Smith has traveled with us as well on many trips with Lauren. So thank you both for being here. We're going to talk about culinary travel, the stories behind food, and how meals can become a kind of universal language. So one of the things I love about food is that when you travel, it also encompasses its identity. People hear the term culinary diplomacy. They may think it sounds academic, but can you describe through an example or story when food opened a door that the words couldn't?
Well, hi. Thanks, Mish. Hi, fellow Doms, and other guests tonight. We're really excited that everybody is joining us for this conversation. I just wanted to say that. Yes, I mean, I know that sort of getting into like what culinary diplomacy means. Mish, I think there you are. Um, I think a lot of people think culinary diplomacy, like you said, is sort of an academic term. But what it really means is people just using food to connect with each other. Culinary diplomacy has, like when you're talking about the academic term, there are different kinds of culinary diplomacy, which is like government to government exchange. There's government to foreign population, where they're trying to make a connection, which is like what we did at the State Department when the government was trying to engage with local people of different countries abroad. And then there's that people to people engagement. And that's what we really focus on at the Culinary Diplomacy Project. In my past life, when I was at the State Department, I was very focused on obviously the other kinds of diplomacy, culinary diplomacy, which was the government to government and the government to people. But I think that culinary diplomacy can be so powerful in all of these different avenues. And what we've seen in our work is um, pretty tremendous being on the ground and engaging in culinary diplomacy. What we do is we go to different countries and we take chefs who have not been to those countries to immerse themselves in that culture, and really get off the beaten path, cook with the local people, learn their customs, their traditions, and really understand who they are through their food stories. And an example of I think you asked me an example of when I've seen
Mm-hmm.
something like this, something powerful. And an example comes to mind when the first trip that we did, we were in Jordan, and Art was actually on this trip too, and we were engaging with Jordanians, but also Syrian refugees who were living in the community, as well as we visited some Syrian refugees living at Zatari refugee camp. And we had an opportunity to cook with them both at Zatari and also out in the community. And we had this one specific dinner where we were at somebody's house, a Jordanian family who was hosting us. And we had a few women from the Syrian refugee community come and cook with us. And so the chefs were all in the kitchen. Everybody was in the kitchen cooking together and learning Syrian recipes. But one of the women was very quiet. She wasn't really engaging very much and wasn't talking very much. And we did have to, we had interpreters with us as well because, the language, there were some language difficulties, but um, so we cooked together and then we all sort of sat at this long table in the garden for dinner. And it was really beautiful. It was just a really special night that sort of came together in a very random way, but worked out really well. And so we were sitting there, we were eating, and at the end of the dinner, the woman who'd been very quiet all night stood up with a young woman who was interpreting for her, and she said, I'm ready to tell you my story now. And
So we've
it
eaten
was,
together.
yeah, and it was
Great.
really, it really took everyone sort of aback because, it was really culinary diplomacy in action, seeing it happen where, she walked in not feeling comfortable. Nobody pressed her. Nobody was like grilling her, asking her questions. We were just all enjoying each other's company, cooking. And I really think, when you sit and have a meal together, it really connects. But when you cook together and share a meal, it takes it to another level of
Right.
almost family, right? And
Yeah.
so by the end of this meal, she felt so connected to everyone that she felt comfortable now speaking.
Mhm.
And there was not a dry eye at the table. Everybody
Right. We
was
remember that. Yeah.
very emotional because her story was so powerful, and that expression of trust that had come from the time we had spent with her, it was just really special. And I remember even after the dinner, she walked around hugging everyone and saying, I feel really connected. I feel like we're
Right.
family now. And I thought
Well,
that
that's
was
good. Yeah,
special.
that's a good segue, Art, into this idea because you've cooked in so many communities across so many countries. Is there one thing that you think brings people together? Is it the ingredients? Is it the table? Is it the idea of shared meals? Like, in your opinion, what's the fastest way that food builds trust between people?
Share your food.
Share it.
I think sharing your food is probably it's something that all mothers teach their little ones very young at age. And I think that sharing, regardless of whether you've made it or not, it shows an act of generosity. And I also feel like cooking is truth serum. If you want to
Mhm.
know, it's like when you go to the salon, you get your hair done, and you want to tell the person that's doing your hair everything about you. It's like it catches you off guard, and what you find is you will find out that people will tell you a lot more when they're focusing on one thing and they're talking and they're thinking about another thing. And I have found like I remember that night too. And I also remember when I was in Azerbaijan and um, Lauren has sent me there and I went to a refugee camp there and I was sitting at this big table and the head of the community, of the refugee community, I sat next to him and I was eating this delicious food and I was saying, there was all men. And I said to him, I said, this food is so delicious. And in many countries, I've been to, it was very typical. The table would be, the men would be there and the women would be in the kitchen or whatever. But what I found interesting, and he was, like I said, he was the head of the community. He looked at me, he said, "Would you like to tell my wife how delicious the food is?" And I was like, oh my goodness, it made me so proud that he wanted me to meet his wife and for me to tell his
Mhm.
wife how delicious the food was. And that was really remarkable because in many situations, men have a tendency to kind of take up the space, and then the women are behind the scene. And I love the fact of that interaction. And because in some countries, like I said, it's very difficult, but I particularly love that. I mean, I also, and one experience I find too is that, the act of teaching cooking at children is an incredible thing too. I remember working in South Africa with Oprah when we opened the school there, and we taught the little ones how to cook, and they were very young. And I remember taking my mother, and many of these girls they came from their homes for education, and having these older women were like their grandmothers, and I was thinking, would my mother be accepted as like that grandmother figure? And I said, mother, I said, you make a wonderful chocolate cake. I love it, but I know if you make it for them, they'll love it too. And it worked. It's
Right.
there's that maternal thing that's going on,
Sharing that moment
that
too.
moment.
Hmm.
And I always say, like, when it comes to like desserts, I mean, sweets remind us that life can be sweet.
Right.
And so that's why I think you should always end a meal with a little sweet. Um,
And that's the thing, right? Art is that food really is this entry point, right? For
most
people.
definitely. Most
Um,
definitely.
keeps us human, keeps us hopeful,
Right.
and like you mentioned, as a shared thing that we can all do together, whether it's your grandmother's recipe and you're from one culture or another culture, right? You
Right.
all have something in common. Um, with the way of the world right now and how we're all trying to stay globally connected. And, a lot of people are feeling exhausted by politics and the headlines, but food really is our common denominator, right?
Most definitely. And I also believe that there are no angry people, just hungry people.
Right.
And I believe that most challenges that we have on this planet start with hunger.
Right. Right.
And I think it's so important. I mean, I don't sign a contract unless I'm feeding people.
Right.
I'm telling you, I've got food there. I think
Right.
it's I everything. It's all
Right.
it's such a
It's
part
it's
of who I
it's a
am.
connection.
It
Yeah,
is a connection.
100%. Hmm.
And I think that, I always say when all else fails, feed them. Keep
Right.
feeding them. You feed them, they come, you keep feeding them, they stay, and you feed them more, and you get what you want. And
Right.
I think it's such an important part of diplomacy. And we underestimate the power of food and the table, and
Hmm.
how, when you look at history and you look at all the things that have happened around the table, you're truly incredibly mesmerized by the fact that, it hits truly magical. And the fact is that we do, and I do believe that we do underestimate it. And I think most challenges that we have can be solved with food. And I know it's for some people, they think I'm kind of simplifying it, but I've seen some situations. I've worked in politics, both sides of the fence, and all been all kinds of situations, in good times and sad times, all kinds of times. But a little food always makes things a little bit
Right.
better.
Well, and I think that's the really interesting thing, Lauren, about the program and what you're doing is how do you kind of stay globally connected, right, without hitting on the politics that is so easy to get into? How do you feel like you've been able to keep that with the chefs visiting all these different countries?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I mean, my background is that I worked for the State Department, and I worked for the Obama administration. So, starting this nonprofit, I was very cognizant of that background, but wanting to have a nonprofit that was not political, and that never got into politics or policy ever, because the whole point of what we do is to bring people together and connect them and to find that common ground. You said like this particular moment in time. I think we are living a moment of great stress and anxiety. And I think that people are living under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of rage. I mean, these road rage, people are wound so tight right now. Like I, I had like a mental breakdown a week ago because of a baby monkey in Japan. Like I was like,
Right.
baby monkey is being bullied.
Yes,
I'm
and we're
having a
all
mental breakdown.
obsessed with punch. Yes.
Right. Like
Yeah.
but like the world had a meltdown over this baby monkey, which is comforting because it shows we still have empathy. But I think that, I think one thing that's really important right now is to find the joy. And I think food is where most of us can find joy. And so I think it is important for people, for chefs, for people like art, for organizations to really kind of focus on that. Like what we like to do when I have a dinner or do some kind of event, it's really important for us to say, hey, everybody, we're here first and foremost to enjoy ourselves.
Right.
Let's have a nice evening. Let's interact as human beings. Let's just like turn our phones off and have a nice time, and then we'll sort of from there we move on in terms of how we're going to connect with each other. But I think it's just so important to focus on first find the fun, and I think food does that. When we
Can
when
we,
we do
sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
when we do our programming, and how do we stay sort of not political, I think people often sort of challenge that idea, like, oh, how are you going to go to Jordan and go to a Syrian refugee camp and not get into politics? And it's frankly very easy to stay away from, easier than you would expect. Because when we went to the refugee camp, we worked with the UN, and we didn't talk about politics. We didn't talk about anything other than those families were teaching us their food traditions and telling us how to make them, and sitting down and sharing the meal with them, and just sort of laughing and enjoying cooking together. And so I think what's so great about food is it really lends itself to just interacting as people rather than having all that political noise come in. And I think that's also why chefs are such great messengers when it comes to sharing cultural information, because their followers are so um, diverse. Like there's just so many different people that follow chefs. They're all different political backgrounds, all different socioeconomic backgrounds. They're from all over the world, all over the country. And so it's this just amazing group of people that are watching them. And when they're sharing what they're doing and the cultures that they're learning about, they're sharing that with so many people without any of the political sort of noise around it.
Well, and I think what's interesting about this, and I want to just focus on the Jordan trip just for a moment, because I'd love Art to talk a little bit about, being on that trip and what American food, right, you shared with people there on the ground, what you learned from them, and how you kind of brought that back, Art.
What I find is that if there is this consistency about sharing, if you are just as equally interested in sharing, if you're equally as interested in learning their food ways, then it will naturally go right back to to them, where they, it's as long as they feel like there's a balance. And I always found, like, remember when we were in those little tin buildings in the refugee camp, and the lady was sitting on the floor and she's making that pastry, or we're making the other things, just how engaged she was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that she was equally engaged with the fact that we were interested in what she was creating and making. And I remember, like, one of the things was, it's like, we did this. Remember that event we did at the hotel where, I
Yes.
did fried chicken and biscuits, and I'm like, and I think when it comes to food, if it tastes good, foods that taste good is universal. I don't care what it is, and but you
It
remember,
opens the conversation, right? Some people have
it
never had a biscuit.
right. It doesn't really make any difference what it is. If it tastes good, they'll love it. But do you remember, like, when we were sitting outside and we had that lamb and yogurt, that manza? Remember that big thing
The
that they,
manza. Yeah.
yeah. And I was, and it was like this big. But the fact was, we were, they were all looking at us like, well, the Americans actually engage in this. Remember, we did.
Hmm.
Remember how we did, and that was wonderful. That was really, really, truly amazing. But I think that we showed such an engagement into really their food culture. I mean, I when I still remember us, stopping at the spice stand and talking about the spices and everything, and walking down that little alley and going into that bakery and the smell of bread. And you remember we played with the dough, and then we went back and went across the street, and they were making the king's favorite shawarma. And we
Mhm.
watched them how they just took everything from scratch and cooked it. And they were showing, and they were very, you they loved the fact that we were interested in their
Yes.
food culture. And I think that's the part. I truly believe that some people just want to be heard and not feel ignored. And I
Right.
think and I think that what we're able to do is that we are there to learn just as much and I think by having an attitude of being the student rather than the teacher, you can cross many boundaries.
Yeah, I
And
just want to, I kind of want to chime in on that really quickly because Art just brought up such a good point. I think what's really important when you're engaged in culinary diplomacy as Americans, a lot of the world is used to Americans always telling everyone else how to do everything, right? Like we're always like,
Metro,
it should be done. And I think what makes food so great at forming these bonds and connections when we're traveling abroad is more about us having the interest in learning their food and shutting up and just like Art saying, like being interested, saying, teach me, I want to learn about you. I'm not telling you how to do something, but I'm learning from
Mhm.
you.
right,
And I think when we travel, the way that we typically wind up sharing American culture is when we're engaging with culinary students.
right,
Like we try to engage with like underserved, culinary programs, and then we'll share, the chefs will share some American dishes with them, or we'll do maybe like sort of a festival event like Art was talking about with the fried chicken. But I think when you're talking about cultural exchange, I think for what I've seen both at the State Department and doing this work, it's much more powerful if we are there to learn and
Mhm.
understand.
I,
And
I agree with you
I
100%,
agree.
Laura.
And Lauren, this is a really good, can you just take a minute and talk to us about what makes these trips unique for chefs? And a little bit how you put it together. Like, how do you get, to the person that's showing Art how to cook in a refugee camp, right? Can you just take us a little bit through that process and what makes these trips so unique?
Well, I mean, I think first, as I mentioned, I worked at the State Department for 5 years, and I ran the program, their culinary diplomacy program there, and we were sending American chefs abroad to engage with our U.S. embassies. And when Art said he went to Azerbaijan, that's when I was at the State Department, and we sent him on a State Department program to Azerbaijan. I learned a lot from that work in terms of what is culinary programming is not as easy as it sounds. And I think everyone on this call who's listening knows this. Everybody's in hospitality for the most part, and you all understand that cooking is very labor intensive. It's very tiring. There are a lot of there's a lot of planning that goes into all of it. But on the flip side, the great thing about chefs, and again, many of you probably on this call are chefs, is that we can also throw you somewhere that maybe doesn't have the best cooking utensils or heat sources, and you're going to come up with something great and you're still going to make it great. So, chefs are so good at this type of programming because we can go into somebody's home that doesn't have, a fancy stove or we're literally sitting on a dirt floor in somebody's home and cooking, and they're able to still do this and come up with dishes and things like that when we're in those situations.
Mhm.
Our trips, I learned a lot from when I worked at the department. Like I said, sort of what works and just making sure that the chefs are engaging with local people, um, local chefs, but we also want to go to restaurants that are doing really cutting edge food in that country. So we're not just learning the humble food, but we're also, spotlighting the exciting food that chefs are doing in that country and where their food is headed. So yeah, I don't, is that sort of what you're asking me?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Right.
because I think it's really interesting, right? Like these trips are not trips that you could get, anywhere else, right? They're very
No, no,
specific. They're not sponsored. The chefs volunteer their
no.
time. And so, Lauren and her team really tries to make them so unique. And I think that
Right,
kind of adds to the experience for
right.
you and helps with when you come kind of back to the United States, whether it's in your restaurant or you're cooking an event, to kind of incorporate something that you've learned along the way.
Most definitely. For me, it's like, I didn't have a formal training, but I did have a formal training from great women.
Mm,
My grandmothers, my mothers, my aunts, and then I had these other great women. And what I have noted on these trips that I've taken, we've had some amazing women that I truly do believe that we've helped to give them a voice because we've acknowledged them. And because when you think about the trips that we've gone on, there were all these amazing women who've told us their stories. But
yes,
and which I think is right. I still remember, I don't know if y'all remember, you remember that spread at the refugee camp they did with all the women came
yes,
together and made all that food?
Yeah.
yes,
But do you remember the man that came up with the two little boys?
Yeah.
yes,
But we couldn't figure out if he had a there was a mother, there was a wife, she was missing.
right.
But do you remember how important it was for him for us to taste what he had made? You
Yes,
remember?
yes, yes.
And he was and the
And he
little
was so proud of it.
so proud of it. And his
Mhm.
son was just there. Remember how
Right.
cute? And
Yeah.
it was the pride there. And there was this sea of women, but yet there's this one man with his little boys, and he wanted us to taste his
Yes,
food. And I
yes.
and I still remember
That
that
moment. Yeah.
yeah,
And I also think the beauty of that, especially with the refugees that we saw, was their story that when they left their countries, right, and were walking to another country, they couldn't take anything with them, right? They couldn't take
right.
recipe books. They couldn't carry things. And so the food that they cooked for us was their memories of cooking it in their homes. And how powerful was that, right?
It's so powerful.
Right.
And you walk in these really modest, very modest, you remember that
Yeah.
many of those homes were just lean-tos or with tin, but
Mhm.
yet they had created home within these structures. And how we sat there on their carpets, which were the floor, and we sat and listened. And what was great about it, they didn't really have to they didn't have to speak English. It's like when you're cooking, there's that international language. People who have an engagement in food, we all
Mhm.
sp- we all speak that same language because we can watch, and just the act of sharing and watching and engagement. I still remember, how the woman made those wonderful, remember those crepes, and she didn't say much. You remember? And she made those crepes, and with the and then she put the pistachios, and then she put the syrup,
Oh, yes, yes,
but remember, she was very quiet,
yes.
and she put it to, and what was wonderful too, this is something else, is this beauty. Here you're in probably, I think at the time, it was considered the world's largest refugee camp. Remember? I think
That's
Yes,
so.
right. Yeah.
yes, that's right.
Right. But do you remember that when we walked into this very modest structures, the first thing they do, we sit down and they bring out these wonderful little little things of food for us, these pickles and
Yeah.
other,
Yeah. They
and
put out like
tea.
everything they had
Right,
to
but
welcome
they
us.
wanted us to have
Yeah.
something to
Mhm.
show hospitality.
Mhm.
Here are people that have been through God knows what, but yet they wanted to share this food with us, and before we actually did anything. And I thought that was so touching, is that
Yeah.
again, it goes back to that generosity, that they may not have much, but yet they still have the spirit of generosity that they
Right.
share. And I found that really, because you and I think we're together, Micheline. Were you the same? You were in a different house than we were, I think, Lauren. But
Yeah,
we were making the little
in Aqaba.
the
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was great. It was just really that was an amazing thing. It doesn't, I heart the people, but what I found what was amazing is through all of that and all that they've been through, they had spent what you were talking about, joy and hope, and
Mhm.
it's that these people had still not lost their joy or their hope, and yet they somehow or another, I feel that what brought them that was sharing what they know, and that people cared enough to listen and
Hmm.
and also just eating, and liking their food, their culture. I mean,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think also, when we went to the refugee camp, we were very fortunate, first of all, that we were able to work with the UN. And what we did was we got permission, which was very special permission to go to the markets with them, walk around to the markets at the refugee camp, and then go to their homes and cook with them in their homes. And I think, first of all, when people are displaced, like Micheline was saying, they can't run with their family heirlooms. And so holding on to their culture is very difficult when they've been displaced and they're going through a lot of stress, and difficult situations. And food is how people, when they've been displaced, it's a very powerful way to hold on to your culture, to maintain your roots and your connection to your culture and where you come from. And I think what's interesting about the UNHCR, is that when they first were doing this, they were basically like putting food in these markets that were like pasta and this and that, whatever. And they found out very quickly that this wasn't the food that
mm,
this community wanted to cook. And so they
Raised
had to
and
like,
found.
right,
Yeah.
they had to like stop and think, wait a second, like we have to figure out what kind of food is that these folks are comfortable with, are used to eating, and will make them feel more at home. And so they had to change all the food that was available, which I think is really interesting and
You know
smart.
what's so funny that you say that, Lauren? I was remembering when we had all the flights from Afghanistan coming, right, to
Yeah.
Dulles.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the people on the ground were smart enough was, as people were coming off of the flight, was to get local chefs, from Afghanistan to cook foods, right, that people knew. So when they got off a flight in the United States for the first time, they were greeted, right, by something from their culture. So
Yeah.
I think that's a very powerful,
Exactly.
it's
And,
true.
just quickly, like what I think the reason why we had such a great connection and interaction also with the families at the refugee camp. Keep in mind, people are coming through this camp all the time. They're walking through and they're looking at them, right? And they're like observing and they're seeing what's going on, and people aren't really interacting with them. They're not really talking with them. They're seeing a lot of government people from different countries walking through, but we actually spent time cooking. We weren't like asking them, difficult questions about their journey or this or that. We just sat
No,
down and engaged with them as people and as human beings. And I think that's why we were able to connect in that way, because food allowed us the opportunity. Whereas I think it's otherwise very awkward and very difficult, and the situation is very complicated.
Mhm.
Um, I also wanted to point out that World Central Kitchen has done a really beautiful job with this, as well, because I remember when the folks were coming out of Ukraine, and World Central Kitchen was set up in Poland, and they, realized very quickly that, we're food isn't just sustenance, right? Like it's also comfort. And people are fleeing their homes in their country, and it's not just about feeding them, it's about comforting them
Right.
and feeding them food that is comfort to them. And so I think World Central Kitchen did a beautiful job. We did a program with them, in Brussels, talking about how they were making food that was culturally
Relevant.
familiar, right?
Convenient.
And so that it was giving them comfort as well as the food,
Mhm.
Right.
like the sustenance. And I think that's critical.
Yeah.
Right.
hmm I know that Lauren, you've got a short video that you want to show everybody so they get maybe a little bit of a better understanding of what a trip is.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's a very short video, and it's just about a trip that we did to Peru. And I thought it was important, just in terms of sort of also hearing, while chefs are on the trip, sort of what they're taking from it. And I think this video sort of shows kind of more closely what we're doing on the ground and what chefs are sort of taking from that. The trip we did to Peru, that's what I'm going to show you a video on, and it's less than 2 minutes. And we did this program with Simply, which is a food company which we'd never done before. It's kind of a different model for us. So I just wanted to explain that because they'll be mentioned in here. We're very careful with who we partner with, obviously, especially when it comes to food. Everyone wants to be very cautious about what we're working with, the food products. Simply is an amazing company that actually works with farmers, small farmers on the ground in Peru and other countries they create these collaboratives to get their product to market. And it's amazing. It's almost like they're an NGO, which is why we really enjoyed working with them, because they're really sort of all about the small farmer and making sure that their products are getting out there. So let me share my screen. Hold on. Sorry. Oh wait, sorry. I just had it are you guys is it still sharing or no?
No.
No.
Okay. Sorry about that. Not technologically savvy. How about now? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Behind every grain, every spice, every meal, there's a story. Ours begins when the Culinary Diplomacy Project and Simply came together to bring a group of chefs to Peru, where they would learn, share, and deepen their understanding of the land and its people. From the vibrant markets of Cusco to the ancient salt flats of Maras, we cooked alongside farmers who have cultivated these traditions for generations.
My name is Lauren Bernstein. I am the founder and CEO of the Culinary Diplomacy Project. We are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to promote better cross-cultural awareness through global culinary engagement. We partnered with Simply because Simply focuses so much on the person and not just the product, but empowering the person behind the product.
Hablar de sal es hablar de cultura, ¿no? Es hablar de una cultura viva. Es volver a lo que hacían nuestros antepasados.
Feeling the connection that the people that are working there have to the people that came before them was really powerful.
In tasting everything that we tasted, whether it was the cacao or the salt or the chilies, everything tasted like I was tasting in Technicolor.
The opportunity to explore a new culture that I'd never been to, it's going to make me a better chef.
We had a lot of special experiences that we wouldn't have otherwise got to do. So I'm extremely grateful for that.
We learned centuries-old family traditions, shared some of our own, cooked together, laughed together, and forged lasting bonds that go far beyond the plate. Food isn't just about the ingredients. It's about the people, the places, and the stories that bring us together.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
But that's about sharing.
Yeah. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I'm going to kind of bring it together with this more fun question, and maybe we'll kick off with you, Art. But what's the most meaningful meal someone has shared with you while traveling? What is one that and I know that there's been many because you've traveled all over the world, but
I think that I remember when I was in the hills of Jerusalem and Lauren had arranged for me to go there, and
State Department trip.
and the chef there took me up into the hills, and Chef Moshe.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we sat in this beautiful meadow on the side of the hill overlooking Jerusalem, and we're sitting in the meadow, and he's plucking all these different little greens out, and he says, "Taste this." And it was almost like we sat there and ate a salad. And it was just so, and he sat there and explained to me each thing that was so incredibly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was extremely wonderful. And then in Jordan, I remember I loved, what I loved. I loved watching the Bedouin. Remember when we were out in the Wadi Rum, and you remember how we sat there, and I think I was barefoot because I think either I'd lost my shoes, my mind, or my cell
You
phone,
definitely lost
something.
the phone for a minute. I remember that. You did.
Oh, we remember the phone
Oh my
incident.
God.
Looking for a cell phone.
I think that was just. I
In
think
the
that was just.
desert.
I think that was just an excuse for the guide to take me out to the desert because I wouldn't see the stars. They were so beautiful.
Yeah.
But if you remember, I remember the sand being really warm between my feet. And I remember they were cooking in the ground, and the smell of this delicious, wonderful meats that they had cooked in the ground. Do you remember?
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember putting it in, and just the smell, the taste of that was incredible. And I do, and those are some of the times. And I will say that, that first bit of grilled lamb in that place in the old market, I think it's I think that the food, it's not so much the food, but it's the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when when the food is it's not, when the food is not lonely, meaning that it's actually connected to a person, it makes the food taste that much better. Does that make sense?
No, I agree 100% because I had two for me, Art, as well. And one of them was when we went to Saudi Arabia, also, in the desert, and we sat with just the women were all sitting together and the men were behind a curtain on the other side.
Right.
That was an experience because you're in the desert and you're just with women and all of this. But an unusual experience was we did a trip to Calgary with the Canadian Embassy. And I'll tell you, the students, when we went to the school, were so excited to cook for us and cook with their local ingredients that made the moment, right? Their excitement and their joy of coming up with dishes for us to taste.
Yeah.
And it's Canada, and so you think to yourself, well, okay, what is that going to be like? But it was mind-blowing because of the people. So I agree with you, Art. I think
Right. It's that their love and their joy and everything it all went into the food. You can taste it in the food.
Right.
And like I said, I don't want any angry food or lonely food.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think, for all the people who are on this call right now, you're all in the hospitality industry. And I think the point we're trying to make at least, is that food is really powerful. And this is a difficult moment in time for the US and for the world, just for a multitude of reasons, politics aside or any of that. There's just a lot going on. We're being separated by technology. We're becoming more and more disconnected from each other. And I think the food industry, the hospitality industry, is critical right now in bringing people together in their communities, in their local restaurants, finding ways to keep people connected. And I think food is kind of one of the last common denominators that we have. I think it's something that allows us to put politics aside and allows us to share a little bit about ourselves in a safe space. And I think that this is a time where I hope we can all kind of do some good in our communities, in the work that we do, just inviting people over for dinner or sharing family recipes, or even just asking people about their family recipes.
Right.
I agree.
Everybody should just go to Micheline's house because she makes the most amazing Greek food in the world.
Greek food. I can do some Greek food.
Yeah. I think we should do. Go ahead.
I know Bonnie has some questions for us.
Yeah, I'm gonna just run through just a few in the chat and hopefully throw in one myself. Melissa asks, how do you build the trust to let them allow you into their kitchens? And I'm talking about, I guess, when you not in refugee camps, but maybe in the private homes that you've gone to. How do you make that connection work?
That's funny. When people want to cook with you, it's a lot easier. Like I'm always surprised how people are very welcoming. What we usually will do is for me personally, the way I handle it is I'll start engaging with people on the ground where, in the country that we're visiting, we'll start working with the local government. We usually reach out to the State Department. We start reaching out to local NGOs who are doing really good work in the space. And just through making those relationships and starting to talk to people and going to restaurants and talking to local chefs and things like that, just sort of using our own networks, we've been able to identify people that are willing to let us come in. We've never had someone say no, which is interesting because it does sort of feel, it's your personal space, like thinking about all these people coming into my apartment right now. But we haven't had any issue with that. People really, especially when we're visiting another country, we're also bringing, chefs. People are always excited. That's the thing about chefs is people love chefs, so they're excited to have them come into their homes.
Right.
Um, um, I just sort of wanted to get a rundown of the scope of this. Like, can you tell us sort of roughly how many countries you visited and or how many chefs you've gotten into the program so far?
Oh, wow.
Well, we have about, I guess, 85 chefs in the program right now. I think is about probably where we are right now. We try to find different, opportunities for folks to engage. While I was at the State Department, we did a lot of trips. We did about 65 trips, I guess, in 5 years. For us as a project, we've done about, we usually do about 2 trips a year. And we've been operating since 2018, but then, of course, with the pandemic hit a slowdown, and we weren't able to travel for a little while. And we are sort of looking this year at sort of the trips that we're going to do. Hopefully, we're working on something with Art with his new project at the Vatican that we're hoping to be a part of this year. It's the 250th anniversary of the country, as everyone knows, and so there are a lot of opportunities for folks in the food industry. I think right now because it's a political moment, but also there are people who really want to talk about our country without the politics involved. And I think food is a great way to do that because our food story is our story. And so we're sort of looking at ways to do that this year also.
Wonderful.
And Melissa also wanted to know how you bring your culinary diplomacy to areas that are deprived of food. So, other than going through the UN and refugee camps, is there any other way that you also reach people?
I mean, we typically will work with like a Ministry of Tourism. We having worked at the State Department, I always try to work with our government and their government when we go into a country, just even for like safety purposes. But we bring the food with us. So, whenever we're doing programming, we do visit a lot of communities that are impoverished communities that don't have a lot. And when we're doing that, we always bring all of the supplies and everything with us. So that isn't usually an issue.
Judy wants to know, do regular folks like the rest of us on the call tonight ever get to join one of the trips or how do we support you basically too?
Oh, well, that's a nice question. Thanks. We our work with Simply was the first time we ever actually worked with a company, because what we do is I think the reason why we're fortunate to have chefs that want to go on our trips is we make the trip very focused on them, and the experience that they're going to have. A lot of these chef trips, there are probably a lot of chefs on this call. A lot of folks, when they do overseas trips, they wind up on a trip where they're sort of visiting producer, because that's how the trip is paid for. They're getting sort of pitched products. And we're really careful not to ever do that. So we have to fund our trips sort of a little bit differently so that we can just make it sort of about the chef having the experience. So our trips are limited just to chefs. And the experience that they're going to take with them. Micheline is, of course, on every trip also, though, because she's part of the team.
She's a superstar, that's why.
She's a superstar, yes. She has a cool head, it's important because stuff is always going to go down on these trips. Like a volcano erupting in Mexico City when we're trying to fly out. So everyone has to keep a cool head. But yeah, I mean, I think supporting, of course, we love people who are interested in the work that we're doing and wanting to support it.
Lauren, could I just jump in for 1 second? Because we didn't say this, but this is equally important. We do have a lot of things that we do domestically, right?
Yeah, somebody's asked about that. That's a good point.
Yeah. So, it is the trips, and they are open for, people to join, and we really try and curate a special experience to make sure, chefs are from different cultures and they get along, and we don't really want to send chefs that are from a culture to, their own country, that kind of thing. So there's some strategic thought involved in it, but we do quite a few programming domestically to bring the word about culinary diplomacy. And of course, going into the 250th anniversary, we're doing some different events here in town and across the United States as well. So, those are all things that we share on our Instagram and through, websites and our newsletters. So there is opportunities to get involved, to host some dinners and things like that.
Yes, we currently have a partnership with Monticello. We started this partnership last year, but we're really going to dive into 250 with them, and do events in DC and out in Charlottesville that are a lot of fun, because Thomas Jefferson is our original culinary diplomat, and he was very international, as we all know. He spent time in Italy and France and brought a lot of food back from those experiences. So we'll be doing a lot of that. So I think, yes, keeping an eye on sort of the events that we're doing. We'd love for people to come out, or if you want to go to our website and join up and say that you want to get updates from us, we would love that.
And we're happy to put that in the chat. I think we've got like a minute left. I'm sorry this couldn't have gone longer because there are some other questions, but the questions are going to be saved, and I believe that this is being recorded so people can go to it on the lesdamesdc.org website and find it very shortly, thanks to Stephanie Zarpa's efforts. And Susan, do you want to come up and thank everybody? Or
Yeah, just to say, Bonnie, Lauren and I are always available, right, on Instagram and emails. And if people have other questions.
Yeah. What's the best? I can put things in the chat for people to look at besides your website, but I know I see you guys on Instagram all the time.
Yeah, my email is really easy. It's just Lauren, LAUREN at C for cat, D for dog, project.org.
Okay.
And anyone feel free to email me and we can talk in more detail about, there's obviously so much. We've worked with, students, we've worked with kids in the community in DC and culinary. We've done a lot of other things that obviously we don't have time to talk about, but there's always a way for people to get involved if they're interested.
Super. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Susan, you want to come on?
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you. And Art, thank you so much. You've always been such a culinary diplomacy.
You're welcome.
So
and the only thing I could say, if you want to start culinary diplomacy, invite some of your neighbors for dinner, because it starts at home first.
Yeah.
Very true.
And because sadly, having people over for dinner at your home it's become not as often as you think. It all starts at home first. Share your food.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, honey. That's
Thank you all
Susan's cat.
so much. We really appreciate your time and all your your wisdom, your expertise. And hopefully we can continue this with more discussions in the future too.
Great.
So
Thank you
thank
for
you all
having
so
us.
much.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thanks for
everyone.
joining, everybody.
Good night. Bye-bye.